My name is Benny Johnson. As some of you know, I've been struggling with addiction. However, I decided to change my life and went into recovery. I've started this podcast 90 Days Clean, and I want to take you along in my journey. What does lie ahead of me? Let me be frank. I do not know. Will I ever drink again? I do not know. This is how Stairway to Redemption was born. It is my search for answer in a real-time process of what is going to work for me. It is then my aspiration to help you figure out what's going to work for you. It is our journey together. Welcome to Stairway to Redemption, guys. This week, my guest is Nicole. Nicole is a mental health therapist and also nutritionist. Her area of expertise is the benefits of a ketogenic diet on mental health. However, today we are going to focus on one aspect of those benefits, the effectiveness on treating alcoholism. We're going to take a deeper look at her article on her blog, a ketogenic diet can treat alcoholism. Nicole, why don't you introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, hi. So I'm a mental health counselor, licensed mental health counselor in Washington State, and I have been in private practice for over 15 years now. And the last 5 years, I have been primarily transitioning people to ketogenic diets as a treatment for mental health issues.
All right, thanks for the introduction. So I'd like to start the podcast with a segment called the State of the Mind Address. It's basically answering the question how are you doing lately, like recently, something besides I'm just doing fine. How are the things in the world of a mental health professional at this time?
Yeah, things are good right now. So I am on a clinical sabbatical this month. So no clinical one-on-one patients this month. And I've never done this before. And so it's been kind of nice to just have not have to be anywhere other than, like I've had a few of these things scheduled. Oh, I have a cat going on here. So so that has been nice. And I'm just getting to work on projects. I feel pretty good. I just had lunch. I have a workout scheduled for later today. And yeah, I have space to do my thing.
Oh, nice, nice. That's awesome. Like a sabbatical. Sometimes we forget that even our like service, our therapists are people too with their own issues. So, it makes me it reassure me that at least some of them are taking breaks from listening to our problems sometimes because, I heard that not only listening to other can be draining, but also you can be affected like by osmosis by other people's, stories or trauma.
Yeah.
And that affects them too. Yeah, so let's dive in this. We met through Podmatch, and you sent me that article called "Ketogenic Diet Can Treat Alcoholism," and I was very intrigued by it. So I read the paper and the article that you sent, and I would like to dive in it, because that's very interesting and fascinating. But let's start with something simple. My audience might not be familiar with all kind of diets. So, what is a ketogenic diet?
Right. So a ketogenic diet is it is a special kind of diet that will shift brain metabolism from the primary fuel of glucose to something called ketones. And I was just at a talk this morning with Chris Palmer. He's a Harvard psychiatrist who is facilitating the field of metabolic psychiatry by talking about how mental illness is an issue with brain metabolism. And so, but it was interesting, and I bring that up because in the comments, And this was general public, but also a lot of nutritionists and health coaches and stuff were in on this. And they would say things in the comments like, yep, healthy food is good for the brain. And my response to that in the comments is, no, this is something different than just making sure you have enough of the micronutrients you need for your brain to work. This is a profound metabolic shift in the brain that has what we call pleiotropic effects, meaning it has effects on metabolism, but it also does a lot of different things, and some of them at the genetic level. And so a ketogenic diet, a well-formulated ketogenic diet that we use for brain health, has no grains, and is very, very low in carbohydrates. And what that does is it triggers the body to understand that it needs to switch its fuel sources over to ketones. And so it's moderate protein, high fat, and very low carb. And the dietary fat that people eat on a ketogenic diet can then be transformed into these ketone bodies that are very, very beneficial.
All right, I see. Because the first time when I heard about keto diet were for people who are trying to lose weight, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's fair to say. And a lot of people who go on Facebook and the internet and stuff, that's the advice that they're going to get. So a ketogenic diet for neurological issues and mental illness and addiction is a little bit different than the one that you will find on the internet for how to lose weight. Although losing weight can be very helpful for metabolism and can help improve symptoms.
Yes, I was about to say, because my first concern was, how wouldn't be a risk for a person suffering from addiction, especially in this stage where like alcoholism is not the only addiction that most people have. It's mixed with other addictions. And usually from my experience going in inpatient, people are usually underweight. They lose a lot of weight due to use, and they are on a diet rich in carbohydrate to make them, gain weight. And since keto is the opposite of it, wouldn't it be dangerous for a person who's already underweight to go through a ketogenic diet?
Well, you'd have to definitely be careful when you figure out their macros. So people can actually gain weight on a ketogenic diet. I know several people who you can gain weight on it for sure, because fat calories, there's 9 calories per gram of fat versus 4 calories per grams of carbohydrates and protein. And so, yeah, you have to have appropriate macros. They're called macros. And hopefully anyone doing this for addiction would be working with someone on that. And then, of course, anyone who is having issues with addiction, we would also really want to pay attention to their micronutrient status, because anyone having issues with addiction is coming at the ketogenic diet and any nutrition change at an absolute deficit and deficiency place, because having addiction causes you to burn through those cofactors you need in order to feel healthy and be in a good place.
Like by cofactors, you mean, what do you mean by cofactors? If you could,
So, for example, people who have chronic alcohol use will tend to be deficient in thiamine, vitamin B1. And chronic alcohol use can cause some really serious memory impairment. And thiamine deficiency and insufficiency is very difficult to test for. So that's just one example, but alcohol abuse can deplete magnesium. It can deplete the other B vitamins. There's mineral insufficiency. So I have additional training in functional nutrition. So if I was going to work with someone for addiction, it would be the ketogenic diet and really paying attention to their micronutrient status, because those micronutrients are actual cofactors to create energy in the brain and to be able to make their neurotransmitters and to fight the oxidative stress that's been happening with their alcohol abuse issues.
I see. And so my question quickly, how do you know how they got some people to accept the ketogenic diet in carbs? Because we're gonna jump forward, but like most alcohol alcoholics crave sugar, right? When they try to stop. So
Yeah.
crave sugar, crave carbs, right? And in
Yeah.
most institutions, the diet is so heavy on carbs to compensate that craving. How were they able to offer a ketogenic diet? Like, what were the incentive of it at the in the research?
Yeah. So here's the thing. When you have chronic alcoholism, it changes how your brain makes energy, and it uses a different fuel source. It actually starts to upregulate lactate, lactic acid. And so that starts to become a fuel source. So brains that are suffering from addiction in terms of alcohol, they are not using glucose efficiently as a fuel. There are parts of the brain that become hypometabolic, meaning they can't make energy very well. And so what would be the motivation? The motivation would be to switch fuel sources over to ketones, which has some similarities to the fuel source that the alcoholic brain is now adapted to using. Part of why people with alcohol abuse syndromes get such terrible cravings is because when we stop that fuel source that they are adapted to with the alcohol, their brain is starving for energy. And so ketones can slip on in there and provide a bridge for people who have chronic alcohol use disorder. And that's a huge motivation to have less cravings when you are trying to beat this addiction.
So when I read the paper, I saw that the fuel source that is being used by the brain when from people who suffer from chronic alcoholism is called acetate, right? And that's the acetate. That's also one of the ketones, right? So basically, switching from
Right.
from going to a ketogenic diet, you still get to consume the same or similar acetate that is in alcohol. And that's not like a
Yeah.
violent change to the glucose, because even if glucose can be used as a fuel for the brain, the fact that it's not the same source still creates those cravings of um, for
Yeah.
basically alcohol, because it wants
Yeah.
acetate instead of glucose, right? Is that the way?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And acetate, acetyl acetate is one of three ketone bodies that are created in ketogenic diets, and so it's a beautiful bridge for people.
I see. The other aspect, so like in the paper, you said there were four aspects of the study: the glucose hypermetabolism. Can we expand a little bit
Mhm.
more on that? That's
Right.
basically, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So brain hypometabolism. Hypo means low.
Mhm.
Metabolism means creation of energy. And it's just basically discussing how there's certain parts of brain structures in alcoholism that start to not use glucose as a primary fuel. So the alcoholic brain has serious glucose hypometabolism issues, and they're relying on, like you said, acetate for fuel. And so in order to create energy and to rescue brain energy in this population, ketones are fantastic for that. Like you said, they're that bridge. And the other nice thing about ketones and acetoacetate in particular, is they go right through, they diffuse into neurons without the need for complicated machinery.
Mhm.
So so even people who do not have alcohol use disorder like populations with mild cognitive impairment, early Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's disease. And we see this in all kinds of disorders, depression, anxiety. Parts of the brain very early, actually in your 30s, can start to not utilize glucose appropriately. And part of that is because we have a very high carbohydrate rich diet in our society, and it causes a level of insulin resistance in the brain, meaning the certain brain structures just won't use the glucose properly. They're overwhelmed and the machinery is broken because we've been hitting them hard nonstop. And you can get people who start to show hypometabolism in the brain in their early 30s nowadays.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a serious issue. And then you've got people in their early 30s saying, oh, I've got brain fog. I don't know why I can't concentrate. I think maybe I have ADHD. Well, part of it might be that parts of your brain are just not using fuel appropriately. So for alcoholic brains or brains with chronic alcohol use disorder, there are areas that are hypometabolic, and we can use ketones to rescue energy in the brain. But even though we have that acetoacetate helping with that, there's lots of people who have alcohol use disorders that also are not using glucose efficiently in the brain, maybe even before the beginning of their disorder. It's just a poor standard American diet can cause brain hypometabolism, not just chronic alcohol use.
Oh, okay, I see. So another aspect of the benefits of a ketogenic diet for an alcoholic was at the neurotransmitter levels, I believe. Could you expand on that?
Yeah,
Basically,
absolutely.
the different pathways
Yes.
like serotonin and dopamine pathways. So, how does a ketogenic diet affect those paths?
Right. So ketogenic diets have really profound effects on neurotransmitter balance. So ketogenic diets have been used for well over 100 years as a treatment for epilepsy. It's an evidence-based treatment in epilepsy. And what we see in epilepsy and what we see in this population as well is that it will balance neurotransmitters in a very beneficial and holistic kind of way. So a brain that is, an alcoholic brain has a lot of oxidative stress, and a lot of repairs that need to be made. And as a result of that, the brain is quite stressed. And also it increases something called glutamate. So glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter. And we're supposed to make glutamate. Glutamate is an okay thing, but when our diets are not very good and we're not taking very good care of ourselves and we have a lot of carbohydrate intake, right? I think of bar food is mainly, it's hard to find some protein at a bar, right? Or whatever. And so what that does is glutamate at high levels that you see when the brain is stressed. So think about it. The brain needs a healthy environment in order to make neurotransmitters in balanced ratios. And a alcoholic brain is not a brain that is a healthy environment for that brain. And so when the brain tries to make its neurotransmitters, things are really off kilter. It is in distress, and it will make way, way more of the glutamate neurotransmitter than it should. It will make so much glutamate in its distress that it will actually become its own neurotoxic feature. So it can really increase anxiety. And what we see in a ketogenic diet, and I see it with all my clients, the ones that have alcoholism and ones that do not, ones that are here for anxiety or depression, is it upregulates a neurotransmitter called GABA. And GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. It balances glutamate. And it's this kind of chill, feel good neurotransmitter. It's this, I got this neurotransmitter. It's like, life's happening, but I'm not overwhelmed and I can handle it. Yeah. And so it's got really beneficial effects on that. And it also appears to help with serotonin. So it balances out serotonin, and brains of alcoholics are seen to be depleted in serotonin. And we think that that is part of what contributes to some of the impulsivity behaviors that we see in alcoholic populations.
Well, can you go ahead? Sorry, could you describe to us what serotonin does, what we need it, like what the importance of serotonin?
Oh, yeah. Serotonin is, my goodness, it's all over the brain. It's very important. We need it for our frontal cortex to work. And that frontal cortex helps us with goal-directed kind of directed behaviors. We need serotonin, adequate levels of serotonin in order to make melatonin. And if you do not have adequate levels of serotonin, then you will not make enough melatonin to get sleepy, and you'll see your sleep schedule become dysregulated. You'll be that person that, oh, it's 2 a.m. and suddenly I'm awake because I'm not getting enough serotonin. Serotonin affects your mood, your memory processing, your sleep, your ability to think. It's a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah, and basically, a ketogenic diet helps with the regulation of serotonin in your body.
Yes, and also dopamine. So the other neurotransmitter that's important in this, of course, is dopamine. We know that dopamine plays a huge role in addiction, and even more so, it affects the reward, motivation, pleasure seeking, compulsion, the ability to perseverate on goals, that kinds of things. And we know that is particularly disrupted in addiction, all addictions, right? It can be pornography, it can be, gambling. And so what we find is that ketogenic diets tend to regulate dopamine. And some disorders have, the production of too much dopamine, or there's, they aren't sensitive to dopamine anymore. So if you're constantly hitting those dopamine pathways with addiction, they are less sensitive. You need more and more alcohol. You need more and more, right, of the addictive behavior in order for your brain to feel okay.
Yeah.
And and so this helps that a great deal.
Thank you. Another point, I saw that the ketogenic diet helps with oxidative stress. What is oxidative stress? Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so just being alive and breathing and existing, we create something called reactive oxygen species. And we're supposed to have some reactive oxygen species. And when we are healthy and in a good place, our body can pretty much handle the amount of reactive oxygen species it takes to be alive in the world, right? But there's a balance. So once those reactive oxygen species get much more than what we are able to handle, there's something called oxidative stress. Okay, so oxidative stress is a way that we kind of talk about the burden on the body in dealing with reactive oxygen species. And drinking creates huge amounts of reactive oxygen species and a lot of neuroinflammation, which creates reactive oxygen species. And so oxidative stress is basically a neurodegenerative process in the brain that happens with alcoholism. It ages your brain. There's other disorders that have high levels of oxidative stress. Bipolar disorder is another one. Treatment-resistant depression is another one. OCD has oxidative stress higher than normal oxidative stress levels. So really, anytime we get a brain that is reaching out and saying it is not healthy and things are not okay, we can assume that there is some oxidative stress going on. And ketogenic diets, remember I said that they had lots of different ways that they're particularly helpful for brain health and addiction specifically. And one of those is that it upregulates or creates more of a particular antioxidant in our body. It's an endogenous in our body antioxidant called glutathione. And when people do ketogenic diets and they create ketone bodies, some of those ketone body types will switch genes on in the body that say, hey, make extra glutathione. And then that glutathione, that extra glutathione that you make, assuming you have good micronutrients, right? We're taking care of that part of your addiction as well, that part of your healing. You will upregulate and make more glutathione on a ketogenic diet, and that will help reduce your oxidative stress load, which then allows the brain to catch up and to be able to make repairs.
All right. Yeah, I think that's it for the technical part of the study so far. I wanted to ask a more personal question. What is your relationship with alcohol? Are you sober?
I don't drink. So I actually, part of what had me move away from just doing psychotherapy with people and move into ketogenic diets with psychotherapy was I was having problems with my own brain because of some medical issues. And so I am very big on my brain health. And so I do not drink, period, at all, ever, because I like to have a functioning brain.
Okay, so
and
you
I like
don't
to have
suffer...
a good mood. Yeah.
Of course. Like, like all of us, but it's interesting that you don't suffer from alcoholism, but decided not to drink for other reasons. And I did just see like the intersection of like two different worlds, like a mental health world, and not that different, and the addiction world, the recovery world. And so the benefit also don't only treat alcoholism, but will be what are the risks then of a ketogenic diet? Why everybody's not on a ketogenic diet if it's so advantageous?
Man, I don't know. We've been, the whole field, like the research about metabolic psychiatry, the understanding that brain metabolism is the ticket, the understanding that all of these disorders share components of metabolic disorder in the brain specifically has been around for a really long time. It's in the research literature. And I don't see risks. I mean, there's some in the literature, there's some talk about there's a risk of losing weight if you are a vulnerable population, like chronic alcohol use disorder. I would definitely call a vulnerable population. We'd have to get your macros right, and we'd have to give you lots of micronutrients so you can make energy and feel good. Or if you're an elderly person with sarcopenia and we're worried about weight loss, there's that. There's if you don't drink enough water, you can get kidney stones. There are some issues around. Some people need some additional nutritional supports, but there really is not a diet that does not have its own flavor of insufficient micronutrients in some areas, right? Vegan, we have a huge problem getting enough iron. That's actually bioavailable. We have a huge problem getting enough protein, enough amino acids to make neurotransmitters, right? And then we have the other end of the spectrum where we're worried about the vitamin C of the people just eating the hamburger, right? So I mean, there's no diet where there isn't some issue around, hey, you're not getting enough of this or that in there, and maybe we should add some micronutrients. I do not see a huge risk with this. There's a risk. There's a risk if you are on any kind of medication for diabetes, blood pressure, beta blockers, any kind of diuretics, right? Then you need to tell your doctor you're going to do a ketogenic diet so they can monitor those medications appropriately. It is actually very powerful on things like blood sugar and blood pressure. Like I have clients where we have to really monitor, or I have to tell them to monitor their blood pressure and talk to their doctor, because if they're on blood pressure medication, their blood pressure can be normalized in as little as 3 days. And blood pressure medication they're taking is going to lower it too much and they're going to maybe pass out, right? So we got to be careful with that. If someone is on any type of psychotropic medications, which I'm sure many of those people are on chronic alcohol use disorder, that is something else that you have to be careful with on a ketogenic diet. Not because a ketogenic diet is dangerous, but because as your brain heals and as your brain becomes healthier, your brain will work better. And it will not want the high levels of psychotropic medications that you are currently on. Your current levels of psychotropic medication, almost always on a ketogenic diet, after about 3 to 6 weeks, will start to be too high, and you will start to get side effects from those medications, not from your ketogenic diet. It's from the medications. And we know this because when we start to titrate down on those medications after someone is on a ketogenic diet, the side effects go away and they feel better. Okay. So there's a risk that you will need your medications titrated down or adjusted. There are some people who need a bridge medication here or there. I'm just a therapist. I don't do prescriptions at all or give any advice on that, but it is something to be aware of for sure.
I see. Speaking of medication, perfect segue here. Why is there not more incentive to promote ketogenic diet to solve those issues of mood and mental health? There's certainly a lobby of medication, but why even therapists like you why there are not more people like you promoting a pathway through diet instead of medication? What's the deal with that?
Yeah. So there's so many factors to this. There are, such a big question. So there's no financial gain in promoting ketogenic diets. It's diet. You change what you eat and how you eat and what you focus on eating. And that's it. There's no financial incentive. And the powers that be in terms of the food industry, the processed food industry, they don't want you to not eat large amounts of carbohydrates, right? The pharmaceutical companies have basically captured the CME world of doctors. So the training that they get both in medical school is completely insufficient around nutrition. They're lucky if they get an hour and a half to 2 hours of any kind of nutrition training. And even then it is a training that is made by big food. So it's not necessarily doing a deep dive into nutritional biochemistry. And you know what, this is changing because there are so many people saying, hey, I did this and I'm feeling better. I fixed some treatment resistant depression, or this is really helping my anxiety, or I am a bipolar person who's now off medication and using diet only to regulate my symptoms and to recover. The study that I wrote my blog post on, that was a study by the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. It was a randomized controlled trial, which is the creme de la creme of scientific knowledge. And there is a whole movement going on around developing metabolic psychiatry as its own subfield of psychiatry. And so I think it is inevitable that this information is going to get out to the public, but there really are a lot of gatekeepers. Pharmaceutical companies, big food, nutritionists, traditionally trained nutritionists. That entire curriculum has been taken over by the food industry. And so you can go to a regular old nutritionist like you would find at a hospital, or someone going to a nutritionist for diabetes education, and they will be giving you something that is not an evidence-based understanding of how we reverse things like diabetes, or and there isn't a functional nutrition kind of understanding. So there's lots of gatekeepers, and those gatekeepers are giving a lot of information that is not what we see in the literature.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone can go on Google Scholar and they can look up ketogenic diets for neurodegeneration, for alcoholism, for cocaine addiction. There was just a study out on that one with some mouse models that was really impressive. So it's really important that you understand that metabolic psychiatry treatments for addiction and for any kind of mental illness or neurodegenerative issue, we don't have pills. We don't have pharmaceuticals that do even a fraction of what a ketogenic diet does on a metabolic and an epigenetic level. We just don't make pills like that.
Yeah. And that's definitely a big, the lobby of big pharma. Definitely, I see if they don't make money on it, then, they will not push the envelope, and they will actually go against the current. And that's what kind of saddens me a little bit, that like you have to do your own research. You say like go on Google Scholar. Most people just go on Google. They don't understand that Google Scholar is peer review. Like, if you want a study that's been peer review, you use Google Scholar. The effort of doing your own research sometimes is tiring for people. And another aspect of the ketogenic diet and the intersection, like I said before, between diet and the world of addiction is the affordability. How affordable is a ketogenic diet for somebody who doesn't have the mean to, is very low, because let's
Lower
be honest,
income.
low income, carbohydrate food, burgers, bread is the cheapest food ever. And what effort is it gonna require them to switch that diet financially?
Well, the first step is to change your definition of what you think of as food.
Okay. Wow. All right. Let's go there.
So alcoholism. Yeah. So alcoholism really depletes micronutrients. And then if you're eating highly processed foods, which a bun on a burger is, the French fries are, right? These are, highly, so there's highly processed foods out of boxes. So these are really high in carbohydrates. And carbohydrates deplete nutrients. Grains deplete nutrients and will actually block mineral absorption. High carbohydrates diets will deplete thiamine. Remember, it's already depleted with alcoholism. And then you add a high carbohydrate diet, you've got even less thiamine to make your brain work and your guts work, your nervous system. And so my definition of food is if it blocks my ability to be nourished, it's not food. Okay. If it depletes my micronutrients instead of adding to it, it's not food. And carbohydrates, if your brain can't use it for energy, it's not food for you right now, is it? Because it's not working like food for energy. All it's doing is making your blood sugar levels high and your insulin levels high, and it's causing you to be sick. So that's not in my definition of food. If it makes me sicker or it contributes to chronic disease in a very direct pathway, that's not food to me. And so that said, there are ways to do, so your definition of food and picking foods that are highly nutrient dense and highly bioavailable forms of those nutrients kind of trumps that and takes precedent. I would rather see someone intermittent fast, get their ketones up in a healthy way, take a good quality vitamin and eat 1.5 pounds of ground beef every day, because I know that is a bioavailable form of micronutrients for them, that they're going to get every little bit out of that. Whereas it's much different if they're going to eat a box of crackers, right? They're going to be hungry 2 hours later. They're not going to get that important, healthy, saturated fat that they need to fixed structures in the brain that need healing, all kinds of stuff. So there are ways. I have on my mentalhealthketo.com/blog. I do have an article on how to do keto on a budget. And there are
I'm
some
going to
good
reference
options
that,
there.
by the way. Yeah. I'm going to reference it. Yeah.
Yeah. You can get frozen low carb vegetables at the Dollar Tree or the dollar stores now. You can there's canned fish. You can have hot dogs on a ketogenic diet just fine. You can have different lunch meats. You don't have to do a ketogenic diet perfectly with grass-fed whatever. Like, don't let that stop you. Lots of people peel on just old plain hamburger, the cheap stuff in the giant roll at the grocery store, right? Don't get it in your head that you have to have pasture-fed everything.
Grass-fed,
So don't get that in your head. But you do have to restrict your carbohydrates in order to change your fuel source over and get reliable source of keto.
So there is definitely a lot to do to educate the population on the benefit of a diet, not only for alcoholism, like my peers who suffer from addiction, but also in general for the good of mental health. Like if something that came out of COVID was that a lot more people were suffering from mental health, but COVID became that pressure cooker that that catalyst that revealed that a lot of more people were suffering, and I can see definitely the benefit of a diet because instead of going to the doctor or spending money getting prescription pills, insurance. You don't need an insurance to change your diet. You don't, but you do need an insurance to see a therapist and stuff. What can be done, right, to educate the masses? Like, for example, if somebody wanted to know more about this, they will go to your blog, obviously, but where else? Like,
So there's a great book that just got published by Chris Palmer, MD, who's a Harvard psychiatrist that works with all populations, particularly severe mental illness, but definitely alcoholism as well. And it's called Brain Energy. And that is out right now. And that is a very easy to understand introduction to metabolic psychiatry and understanding why metabolic interventions. There's other metabolic interventions, like you can run out and exercise if you've got enough energy to do that and you feel well, right? That's a metabolic intervention. You can pick healthier foods. You can reduce your insulin resistance by not having a bunch of there's different things but ketogenic diets are specifically fantastic for alcoholism. Like, really, they should be in all the treatment facilities. The option to go on a ketogenic diet should be part of all treatment facilities. We have the research right here showing that when people detox with the help of a ketogenic diet, they need less benzodiazepines. They need all kinds of, they do a lot better. They have less cravings. They report better mood. Sorry, my cat is stuck to there we go. And so I'm having a lot of cat problems today. So how do we learn about, these podcasts, people like you doing these podcasts is really helpful to the public. I don't think the ketogenic diet and metabolic psychiatry would be where it is right now if we didn't have people like you doing these podcasts. These are time consuming. So you are doing much more than me in terms of facilitating this. And so, the other thing is educating yourself about it. So when someone says something about it that isn't accurate, you can gently correct them so that they have accurate information.
That's good. We're reaching the conclusion of our interview, and I would like to leave the floor for you. Where can we find you, and how can the interested member of our audience can reach out to you if they need guidance to switch their diet to ketogenic diet?
Yeah. So you can email me at nicole@mentalhealthketo.com. And if you need a provider, I will try to help you find a provider or a prescriber. There are a lot of provider directories specifically for metabolic psychiatry that are being kind of put together right now because the demand is very, very high. And I don't have any room in my individual private practice. I'm only licensed in Washington, so I can only work with people in Washington as a mental health counselor. And I have a wait list, but I also have an online program where I transition people to ketogenic diets as the first stage. And then there's a couple other stages in there. There's a functional nutrition component, which would be very helpful for people, and also nutrigenomics, where we look at your genes and see if you need particular types and forms of nutrients for optimal brain health. So there are online options to work with me, but someone reach out to me, I will send you in the best direction possible, and you can always check out my blog. There's tons of information and resources on there.
All right. Thank you very much, Nicole. This concludes the end of our interview for Stairway to Redemption. I will see you guys for the conclusion.
Hey guys, there you have it. This concludes episode 10. Thanks to Nicole for sharing her insightful knowledge on the ketogenic diet and its benefits on treating alcoholism. I put her info in the description of this episode, both blog posts, the one that talks about treating alcoholism and the other one that talks about how to how to make a ketogenic diet on a budget. I also share her website for those who are interested, and her contact info. Please, if you're really interested in a keto, trying keto to get yourself sober, please contact her. She knows her stuff for sure. I would like also to special thank to all my previous guests. Episode 10, double digits. This is a very important episode. These things is just a little bit older than 2 months. I started in I believe October 14th, if I remember correctly. The double digit 10. So we are growing fast. The social media is growing really fast. The audience is growing really fast. I thank you guys, my audience also, my listeners. I would like also to thank my team, Yuri, D, for your help. And so next week I'm going to take a break from the holidays, but also I'm thinking of taking a break every 10 episodes just to keep my sanity in check and just to give me time to breathe. But I'm gonna keep going with the daily stoics, so you'll see me on social media. Alright guys, so I wish you happy holidays and see you in 2 weeks. Bye.